Welcome back to You're All Doomed, the podcast that tracks its way through Jason Lives, Friday the 13th, Part 6, 13 minutes at a time. I'm Native American history expert Greg.
And I'm Brian.
And this chunk begins with Tommy leading the police through a chase in the cemetery and ends with a girl being flung about a recreational vehicle. I don't remember Tommy's path through the cemetery to Jason's grave to be quite so circuitous earlier in the movie. He might be taking a long way just to try and throw the cops off his trail, but they can see him the whole time, so it's needlessly convoluted, I feel. Garrus does a flying tackle and gets Tommy to the ground, but Jason's grave is now in sight, and Tommy is dismayed to see that it's been covered over.
Yeah, Tommy's trying to get Sheriff Garrus to go over and take a look at the dug-up grave, but that's, like you mentioned, we see that it's now been covered over, and Sheriff Garrus says, well, Jason must have gotten chilly at night and pulled the dirt back over him. So Tommy is, he's pretty shocked by this, and he tries to break free to get a closer look at the grave. And it's at this point that Deputy Rick pulls out his revolver that has a comically large laser sight attached to it. The thing is twice the size of the gun itself, and I have no idea how he even holsters this thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to weigh like 5 extra pounds. Probably uses like 10 D batteries or something. But he utters an immortal line. He says, "Wherever the red dot goes, you bang." That line was stuck in my head for years, and I couldn't figure out where it was from or where I'd heard it because it had been a while before I'd seen this, since I'd seen it, in the first place. And so it drove me nuts, and I was so thrilled to realize that's where this was from.
I was the exact same way. It was just one of those things that another line that it was always stuck in my head that I can never remember where it was from was, "Why don't you wake up and smell what you're shoveling?" Which was Die Hard. But yeah, this was absolutely one. And it also reeks of something that was not written on the page. It just seems like an improvised line, because who says ya bang? And it doesn't make any sense, and it just seems like something that he said like on the 10th or 11th take, and then they just ran with it.
I say that to girls in bars all the time.
Ya bang?
Martin, the caretaker, is nearby, and Tommy, accuses him of covering the grave over and says, it's Hawes, dig him up. The sheriff and Deputy Rick drag Tommy away, apologizing to Martin for the disturbance.
Deputy Rick and Sheriff Garrus act like they got caught jacking off by their mother or something when they see Martin. Like, they're very like, "Oh no, hey, wait, what's up, Martin? What's up?" And like, what are they afraid that Martin's going to do to them? Like, they're the law enforcement of this town.
It's probably a little bit professionally embarrassing that a perp managed to lead them on such a chase, or that they were fooled into thinking Tommy would leave the county quietly or something. So maybe they just, it's too bad that a civilian saw us bumbling this, But yeah, you're right. I mean, it was kind of strangely deferential to this crazy old coot, basically.
But as they're trying to haul Tommy away, he's like trying to get some information out of Martin, and he asks if Martin was the one that covered up the grave, and he needs to dig it up to see who's inside. And Martin responds, "Dig him up? Does he think I'm a fart head?"
And this is another laugh track moment, because the camera then immediately cuts away to a group of the kids at camp, and they're all screaming, "Yeah!" So that answers Martin's fart head question. So there's quite an age range of campers here at Camp Forest Green. I see one little kid who looks to be no more than 6 or 7, and then one who looks like 15 or 16.
Right.
So I'm having trouble figuring out what, if this is an all ages camp, and yeah, it's a little bit disorganized. Megan and her crew are on their back feet because obviously Darren and Lisbeth haven't shown up to run things, and so Megan is attempting to get the kids revved up for their awesome week of fishing and not eating Brussels sprouts.
And meanwhile, Court is in the woods with a group of boys spinning some ridiculous yarn about Indian markers and the Native Americans that used to inhabit the area. And the kids aren't buying it. And one of them even turns to another kid and says, if this is exciting as it gets, we're in big trouble, dude.
Yeah, that's another kind of laugh track moment. But I really love this segment. Court is fucking hilarious. He's explaining these Indian markers, as he calls them, which are little piles of stones that Native Americans apparently use to mark their path on some of their journeys. And he's casually knocking them over as he's telling the kids about them, and tells this rambling tale of an adulterous Indian chief, his son, and the bitchy squaw that the chief was married to. And there's just something about Court's delivery that cracks me up. I had to watch this twice because I was laughing so hard. So then, we're introduced to the peanut gallery, which is these two adolescent boys named Tyan and Billy. And they're sort of like those two old guys who sit in the balcony in the Muppet Show. They spend the rest of the movie kind of acting as an audience voice and complaining about what's going on in the movie.
And then we cut to Sheriff Garris's car pulled over on the side of the road. Tommy gets out of the backseat of the car, and Sheriff takes the handcuffs off, and he tells him, as the sign says, you're now leaving Forest Green. Don't forget to buckle up. But the thing is, the sign actually says leaving Forest Green County, have a nice day. So you can't even really respect what Sheriff is saying. But the point is, he's getting rid of Tommy.
And he's got a really tough cop tone, which is surprisingly convincing because at first glance, Sheriff Garris doesn't seem like a very imposing authority figure. But he's got kind of like a J.K. Simmons quality to his personality that gives some heft to his words, and he's pretty angry with Tommy at this point. So I kind of get on board with him as a sheriff, even though, like you say, he bungles the farewell sign. But maybe it was just kind of more it wasn't meant to be an exact
just paraphrasing
transcription. The evening continues on, and we see Martin the caretaker. He's staggering home through the woods by moonlight, drunkenly singing a song called I'll Take You Home Again, Kathleen. This was a song by Thomas P. Westendorf, written in 1875. A notable recording was by good old Bing Crosby, who is the father of an actor from Part 1. Nearby, somewhat within earshot, two yuppies are celebrating their recent engagement by having a moonlight picnic in the middle of the woods. And they seem like they're about to maybe disrobe and get frisky.
It seems like a very random place to just kind of like throw down a picnic blanket. I mean, it's pretty dark and they're in the middle of the woods. It's not like they're along the shore of a lake or something. It's just kind of a random spot in the woods, and they're all kind of dressed up fancy. And
yeah, I don't. And they're both fully adults, so it's not like they couldn't get a hotel room someplace or someplace more romantic than this. I mean, yes, it's secluded except for Martin the caretaker and maybe one other person, but yeah, it's not like it's very scenic. It's a strange choice.
Yeah, for reasons we'll learn about a little bit later. This kind of moment seems very kind of just thrown together and doesn't make a lot of sense into the context of the story. But for what it's worth, there's this couple, Stephen and Annette, and they're starting to mess around in the woods.
Martin is so smashed from the alcohol, claiming that Kathleen has led him astray, that he's wandered off the road. He hears noises nearby, but he's more concerned with finishing off his bottle. And in fact, there's a laugh track moment where he says that his bottle of booze will be the death of him, sort of like Obi-Wan Kenobi saying that Anakin Skywalker will be the death of him in Attack of the Clones. We're all supposed to be like, oh. He tosses the empty bottle over his head, but is surprised that he doesn't hear it shatter.
Which I loved. I thought that was a nice little touch.
Yeah, it's great. He turns around and he sees that Jason is standing there, and having caught the bottle, Jason comically breaks it and then shoves a jagged edge of the broken bottle into Martin's neck. So Martin is dead. He was played by Bob Larkin. He appeared in Wayne's World 2, as well as Yumi and Dupree. He was also on an episode of Parks and Rec. I'll have to keep my eye out because at the moment I'm actually working my way through that show again, and I'll have to keep my eyes peeled for Bob Larkin, although he'd be quite a bit older by that point. He worked as recently as 2016, but the dude is now 90 years old, so he's a tough old coot.
There are some theories going around that Martin is Crazy Ralph's cousin, but I wasn't able to find any evidence that supported this claim, and it's such a distant kind of connection that who even cares if it is his cousin, but there's definitely a connection in terms of personality traits that, link Martin and Crazy Ralph. They're both playing the kind of crazy coot of the movie, and
neither of them drive cars, apparently.
Right.
That's the kind of fan fiction crap that I hate. Like, it makes the world seem smaller and unnecessarily so. Whatever. Stephen and Annette hear Martin's death scream, and Stephen rather ungallantly leaves Annette and goes to investigate. Peering through the foliage, he sees Jason hacking at Martin's corpse with the machete. Jason, mid-stroke, pauses and turns to see Stephen watching him, which, be like, fuck! It was kind of creepy, although I'm not sure what clued Jason in to the fact that he was being observed.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Like his spider sense tingled or something.
Yeah.
Realizing that he's been spotted, Stephen bolts. He runs back. He does grab Annette, and then they hop on Stephen's bitchin' motorcycle. Unfortunately,
I wouldn't even be that generous. It was a moped.
I was being a bit facetious. But before they can gun it and putter away, Jason runs them through at the same time with the machete. Stephen is the first to die. He was played by Roger Rose, a former VH1 VJ who's done a lot of voice work. He even played the Vision in the very first Marvel Ultimate Alliance video game. He played Mark on a Seinfeld episode called The Pilot, and he appeared on Too Close for Comfort. Annette was played by Cynthia Kania. She was on an episode of Silver Spoons, which was in the Different Strokes television universe, because at one point Arnold and Ricky met on an episode of Different Strokes.
That's right, I forgot.
She's now an acting teacher and an on-set coach for adults and children working in the entertainment industry. She's been married to the actor who plays Deputy Rick since May 31st of 1986, shortly before this movie was released.
So on their honeymoon, they both banged.
Back at the camp, the kids are now asleep. In the boys' cabin, we see that one young fella has fallen asleep partway through an issue of Power Man and Iron Fist. It's either issue number 58 or 65. And then another is tenderly clutching a Polaroid of himself and his mother.
Which I thought was really sad, because you would think that these kids would be excited about going to camp, but this kid clutching the photo of his family kind of implies that he has no desire to be there and he just misses his family and wants to be with them. It's like, this poor kid.
We could come up with some cool backstory where, like, he knows that his parents sent him off to camp because they're back home going through a divorce, and he's very homesick and also is probably Crazy Ralph's nephew or something. In the girls' cabin, one young woman has passed out after writing a lengthy letter to her parents. It says, "Dear Mommy and Daddy, I got to camp today. It was fun." I don't know if she'll finish it and get to mail it before the end of this movie, but she's got a couple of stuffed animals next to her, including a Munchichi Corky Clown doll that I remember seeing everywhere back in the 80s. Another girl in a nearby bed has fallen asleep, humorously reading Jean-Paul Sartre's No Exit. We then immediately cut to a hamster running in his wheel, which is supposed to be a little bit of a laugh track moment, because Sartre was a 20th century French existentialist and phenomenologist who died in 1980 at the age of 74. He espoused that human beings have no creator, therefore have no essence beyond existence, and are condemned to be free. Human beings are therefore fully responsible for their actions. No Exit is a play first performed in 1944 that depicts three people trapped in the afterlife being punished and are locked in a room together for eternity, somewhat like the hamster in his wheel. This is actually the source of the famous quote that hell is other people, which in actuality refers to the struggle of being caused to see oneself as an object from the view of another consciousness, kind of like on the show The Good Place.
Who knew these Friday the 13th movies were going to get so existential? And
Yeah. It shows a little bit of scholarly intent on Tom McLaughlin's part. Over in the counselor's cabin, Sissy attempts to keep Paula's mind off the fact that her missing sister still hasn't shown up, with a card game that she's created called Camp Blood, which involves stacks of cards that represent cabins, and Jason, portrayed by the Jack of Spades. The object of the game is to figure out which cabin Jason is in. Nearby is actually a copy of the David Bowie album Aladdin Sane, which is a nod to the Decoy title used for this movie, and also a little play on words with a lad insane, like Jason could be considered. Megan has apparently gone off, presumably just to flirt with Tommy back at the sheriff's office or something, because she doesn't know that he's been run out of town on a rail. But for now, it's just Sissy and Paula manning the camp.
yeah, and Paula wonders why she hasn't heard from Megan yet. So she decides to call the sheriff to see if he's seen Megan. And also, if Darren and Elizabeth don't show up by morning, Paula wants to send all the kids home because they're not prepared to run the camp without them.
As they discuss this, they're interrupted by a piercing scream. They dash to the girls' cabin, where they find everyone in the building awake, claiming that one very well-lit young girl in the corner saw a monster. They go over to tend to her and basically dismiss it as a dream. They find out her name is Nancy and pretty much just tell her to shut up. They tuck her back in and leave, and probably leave her to be mocked by all the nasty little shitheads in the cabin that are not going to make fun of her.
How do you feel about the inclusion of kids so far? Right now, they haven't done a whole lot, but I thought this was kind of the point where I was intrigued by having the kids involved, because now they're starting to see things and report back to the adults. And I just thought that was nice, because like, kids see things all the time. They think there's a monster in their closet. So in some cases it could be their imagination, but in some cases they could also be seeing Jason walking around the camp. And I think that's kind of creepy, because we're not, as of this point, we have not seen them actually seeing Jason. But I like the idea of these kids being spooked and being kind of like the relay of information to the adults, where they're like, well, hold on, what's going on? It's not just the adults seeing things. It's like they have to listen to the kids and investigate.
Yeah, I think it's great, and that's a big part of why. I like the implied peril of having young children at the camp for the first time in this series. And you're right, it also provides a little bit of a mechanism to build some of the tension that also then keeps the adult characters in the dark a little bit. So we may know what's going on, or think we know what's going on, but it allows some of the characters to not yet fully know what's going on. Paula takes a moment to wonder where Court is, and Sissy kind of smirks and says he's off with someone checking on things that go bump in the night. So we immediately cut to a motorhome, which is a 1978...
Hey, what are you doing? This is my job. First of all, you're wrong, but I'm going to let you finish. What did you do?
Well, I had trouble finding... I saw many images of the correct camper, but various different places said it was a Chrysler or a Dodge or a Ford, but I do think it's a Cobra.
It is, yeah. I had a 1974 Cobra Century. I also don't know if it's, what make it is, like if it's a Ford or a Chrysler or whatever, but the point is it's a bitchin' RV.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty awesome. And has some very identifiable markings on it that helped at least spot it on Google image search, even if I couldn't nail down some of the details. So nice job on confirming some of those things. It's bouncing rhythmically to the song I'm No Animal by Felony. Inside, Court is being ridden balls deep, cowgirl style, by his friend Nikki. She tells him that he has to hold off spurting for 10 more minutes until the end of the song, even though on YouTube the song is only 3 minutes and 37 seconds long. But in another hilarious moment. We get Court's look of disbelief at this directive,
Right.
and I laugh my ass off.
It's great because it's like another 10 minutes. But I will, like, in defense of Court, and I like Court, so I am going to defend him. But we don't know how many songs were played before this one, so they could have been listening to, you know, an entire mix of songs. But you're right; she makes the comment that this song in particular will be over in 10 minutes. So I don't know if she just loves the song and it's going to be, you know, repeated 3 times. But yeah, you're right. The song is only 3.5 minutes long.
Well, and I admire his stamina, even at only 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
No shit.
Felony was a California new wave and rock band active from 1974 to 1991. Their song "The Fanatic" was a hit and actually featured in 1983's Valley Girl soundtrack. "I'm No Animal" was a track on their second album, Vigilante. Tragically, the lead singer took his own life in 1992.
So where did Nikki come from?
That raises a question I have about some of the characters in this movie. I would guess that she's a townie, but I can't figure out if all of the counselors are townies. Certainly Megan is, because her father is the sheriff here. I can't quite peg whether I think Paula, Sissy, and Court are from around there or have traveled some distance to work at this camp. The fact that Court has a hookup makes me think that he's probably from this area too.
Or he's a repeat counselor.
Or he's a repeat counselor. I envision him, you know, seeing Nikki at a bar or something like that, and having a. I don't know that this is necessarily a casual hookup. I get the sense that it's probably a repeat thing, you know, a regular thing, but yeah, her origins are never made clear.
We've talked about how we have these random characters that show up and get killed off right away, but I think this is the first time where a random character shows up with an established character, and we're just supposed to assume that we know what this relationship between the two of them is. I mean, it's pretty clear what their relationship is, but like, we don't know where she came from and why she's there. But you're probably right. She's probably just some local girl, and whenever Court's in town, you know, doing camp counselor stuff, he hooks up with her or whatever. But I don't feel like this is their introduction.
Yeah, I get the sense that they know each other quite well, both inside and out. To Court's mercy, Jason approaches the RV, does a nice little head tilt as he seems to figure out what's happening inside. So he marches over and rips out the power cord, which cuts off the tape deck, allowing Court to finally climax. His Nikki is immediately upset, but Court's raspy, "Oh, wasn't that the end of the song?" is
Right.
priceless. Apparently, after Nikki dismounts, you can hear the sound of Court removing the condom. I couldn't hear that.
No,
but
I didn't pick up that.
Tom McLaughlin claims he intentionally inserted that to promote safe sex. Nikki goes outside to see that the cord has been pulled out and tells Court to go outside and plug it back in. He asks her who unplugged it, and she says, "Smokey the fucking Bear. I don't know." Unfortunately, officially, the character's name is Smokey Bear. The was added for a 1952 song to maintain the rhythm, but it did stick after a use in the 1955 Little Golden Book by that title. Court finds the frayed end of the cord and is startled when Nikki follows him out to see what's taking him so long. They head back in and pause at the door where Court says, "Somebody's out there. What if it's that guy Jason?" So he's obviously been somewhat spooked by Tommy's claims and the legend that he heard from Megan, even though Sissy appears not to take it very seriously.
But regardless, the two are pretty spooked, and so they hop back in the RV and decide that they're going to drive away and get out of there.
Yeah, Court peels out like he's escaping Hoth in the Millennium Falcon.
which causes Nikki to go tumbling on the floor to the back of the RV, which I thought was a pretty nice comedic moment because she's trying to get her footing in this RV while Court is speeding away, and she's just like bouncing off walls and running to the front, running to the back.
Yeah, that must have been kind of fun to film.
Right.
She probably got banged up a little bit, but...
You mean by Court, right?
Yeah, right. And that's where this chunk ends, with Nikki being flung about. The death count is 3, unless you count the hundreds of millions of sperm cells that now coat the inside of Court's discarded condom.
To find out where Nikki and Court are heading in the RV, I guess you're just going to have to tune in next week. So until then, you continue to be all doomed.